Hello friends and welcome back to ReddX, your source for the freshest daily cringe content anywhere on the internet. Promise, swearsies, it's just a fact and it's totally science. Go ahead and look it up. For our editorial this weekend, I just wanted to kick back for a little bit, give you guys some writing tips. We had a story recently in the Twitch chat that just really squished my brain. I didn't find it enjoyable in the least, and it seems to be a theme. We've had Party Demon, we had Has-Been Beard. There are a lot of stories out there that I come after the OP, and people seemingly think it's for no reason at all, but I definitely do have my reasons, so I'm gonna go over those today with some writing tips that even Redditors can understand. There are a lot of YouTube channels out there that'll just read the story, no side comments. They're like, cool story, bro, let's go to the next one. That is not what ReddX is. I calls it like I sees it, even if it hurts, and hopefully these tips will make it a little bit easier for you to not get called out. At least here's to hoping. We are live streaming this one on Twitch as well. Come on through, link in the description if you would like. We'll get some additional plugs and disclaimers out of the way, and then we will dive right into some of these writing tips for Redditors. So basically very minimal visuals today. I don't want it to be a meme-y sort of video with a bunch of giffies in the background and stuff like that. So it's just gonna be me talking to you one-on-one, and I hope that's all right. So when it comes to writing stories on Reddit, there really is quite a distinct style to them, if you might have noticed. And specifically, I'm referring to story format stuff like neckbeard stories, tales about Kevin, also entitled people, I guess, if you're into that, etc., etc., etc. And these stories often take place from a first-person perspective. They include a cast of characters, or a focus on a singular event or individual. There is something really painful about poorly written submissions, and so I thought, why not pass along my own opinions on what it is that makes a story good, enjoyable, readable, and what makes one just really bad. I'm in no way an expert on the written word, but years of reading on Reddit has allowed me to pick up on a few of these nuances that seem to do better than some of the other things that you might find on Reddit. Now, you could tell me to take this advice and shove it up my poop chute, and that's totally fine. Maybe I am totally wrong about a lot of this, but whatever. I decided to throw my fedora into the ring, and we'll just give it a whirl, right? So, let's see what happens. And we will begin with Chapter 1, probably the biggest, most important chapter of all, and that is self-insertion, and not in the fun way. As a writer of a Reddit tale, you are quite obviously the narrator, unless you're writing fiction, which is known to happen from time to time as well. As the narrator, you really have no choice but to write yourself into the story. And this is where a lot of recent OPs that we've seen can be very insufferable. A good general rule of thumb here is to not go into extraneous detail about yourself unless it is relevant to the story. Even then, it's best to show and not tell. Are you perhaps a tall OP? Maybe one that's really good at volleyball and football with a grandpa trucker that has metal hands? Well, great. We don't really need to know how tall or really any of that exactly. Maybe you could just demonstrate your skills or your height in the tale by talking about looking down on someone as a form of intimidation, or, reaching up on a high shelf like some sort of Giga Chad. Maybe instead of telling us that you're very strong, you could demonstrate that strength within the story instead of bragging about your max bench press. You know what I'm saying? Are you perhaps very smart? Cool. I would ask you to demonstrate that by writing a coherent story. Your intelligence will speak for itself within your writing, I guarantee. Do you have maybe some other quirky traits that make you interesting? Cool. Great, show me in the story how that works or how it is relevant to the story. Physical and psychological attributes can be interesting if they are relevant to the story. If you're just listing off attributes about yourself, you're doing nothing but filling up space. Word salad, as I call it quite often. So, how do you write yourself to be less insufferable? Easy. Do your best to be the vessel for the story, nothing else. Instead of describing who you are, tell us how these things made you feel. What did you see? What did you smell? That way, instead of trying to force us to be on your side, you're essentially just a nice pair of pants that the readers can wear as they venture throughout your story. Excess details about you are great when they play into the story. So, okay, let's do a little bit of practical application here. Let's say you're writing a story about a guy that you work with. He's a backseat supervisor and you are the actual supervisor. How you got the job of supervisor might be relevant to the story if it comes into play in some way. Say you're good friends with the owner or your parents run the place, and that would make you more or less untouchable at your job, highlighting how inept the backseat supervisor's attempts to usurp you are at the end of the day. It also establishes the power dynamic, which the focus of our story may or may not be privy to, and they're also a good source of humor from their impotency. Explaining your thought process in tense or odd situations is a useful tool in writing itself. I'd like to point fingers here to the Stealth Beard OP. He basically did nothing but talk about himself, but it was more about his emotion in the given situation, and it turned out to be a very good saga. Bringing people along on your emotional roller coaster is a great way to be a relatable OP. Why did you do the things that you did? Why did you react the way that you did? This is a really good way to make yourself relatable. Most people have some variety of internal monologuing, and getting to see other people do this is an immediately relatable trait. How you feel is way more important than the meat vessel in which you reside. We can all relate to horror, shock, joy, anger, sadness, hyperness, or any other range of emotions. So give us more feeling and much, much less self-congratulation. Extraneous details are also important to establishing believability to this story, but it has to be a balanced approach. Did you break into someone's car as part of a nuclear revenge tale? Okay, sure. Please tell me why you are so comfortable and capable at breaking into a car. A little bit of background here is definitely important. But do we need the whole tale about how you apprenticed as a locksmith for 12 years and it was awesome and I was the best thing ever? Absolutely not. But just letting us in on that simple fact is more than enough to have us believe your competency. Finally, extra details might be important to the experience as a whole. If for some reason something about you makes the situation more intense, uncomfortable, or just plain screwed up, then that is relevant information. If your sexuality is a component of the story, such as you being discriminated against, yes, that is important. If you have a disability that's a major component of your life, 100% relevant. If it's a unique physical, emotional, or psychological perspective, it also might be relevant. Don't let worrying about being likable keep you from being yourself. But do realize the more you say about yourself, the much more likely you are to be criticized by bad actors. It's hard to write yourself into a story, this much I know, and it's also hard not to try and make yourself likable and unimpeachable in your actions. It truly is a nightmare to have to portray yourself and realize that you might not be the best person. That's fine. All of us are flawed. Even on this very channel, I've said some things that I don't believe a year down the road, but sometimes OPs just go a little bit too hard, trying to make sure that they are 100% seen in the best light. The problem with writing yourself as a perfect person is that it's completely unrelatable. Instead, allow yourself to be flawed, because a flawed protagonist is far, far better than a perfect cardboard cutout. All of this to say, cast the ego aside. There's no reason for it. Yes, we all want to be seen as the biggest, baddest, best person ever, but your story will speak for itself at the end of the day. And being relatable is far, far more important than being perfect. So all this brings us to part 2, which I know a lot of people stress about, and that is set building and chronology. People often come to me and say, ReddX, how's the timeline supposed to go? Can I mix it up? And I say, yes, as long as it's coherent. If you're more comfortable on a linear timeline, then don't feel the need to force yourself to Tarantino all over the place. The exact dimensions and proportions of the physical space that you are in is really irrelevant. What is important is the general feeling of the setting. Is it gross? Is it scary? Is it normally your happy place? All of this is exceedingly important. There's no need to spend more than a few paragraphs describing a setting unless the setting has multiple points of interest. If you're in a house and parts of the story occur at different locations in the house, then okay, a general layout is usually more than enough. 2 bedrooms upstairs, a kitchen and living room downstairs. Yeah, that is the entire layout. That is essentially all that we need to know. Allow the imagination of the reader to fill in how exactly all that lines up. Or better yet, demonstrate the locations by describing how you got to them. The same thing goes for chronology in a story. If it's an old story buried in the back of your head, it might be really hard to get everything down into a coherent chronological flow. And this is when it's best to apply at least a small amount of creative liberty. It's not the most important thing in the world for it all to be a picture-perfect recreation. Entertainment comes first, reality a distant second, as far as I'm concerned, as I've said many times. Capturing the general flow of events is more than enough. And it's even okay to say, I don't really know which one happened first, within your story. Be a normal human. Again, admit that you can be mistaken, that you are flawed. We all are, and that is fine. Those 2 concepts, set building and chronology, are very important if your story has recurring locations of importance. You'll want to make sure that it's portrayed well and consistently in order to avoid confusion. Confusion is what stops the reader from reading or enjoying your story. If your story takes place in school over a long period of time, it might be best to describe the layout of your school as you tell the story in real time. Every first period, I had homeroom in room 202, which was upstairs from the library, and I'd often wander down there during my free periods. And then later on, you go from the library to the PE room. I was going to be late for PE, so I had to exert my asthmatic lungs as I sprinted from the library of the school to the south side of the campus. By demonstrating the emergent nature of your dash to PE, you have satisfactorily demonstrated that it is a significant distance without needing to tell me exactly where it is. Where is the gym? Somewhere on the south side of the school, and within sprinting distance of the library. There you go. That's all we needed. The fact that you're a champion track runner probably also doesn't need to be included unless you are running away from a neckbeard at some point in the story. Time and space are powerful tools in storytelling. Wielded with care and reverence, they are extremely useful tools in crafting a living, breathing retelling of events. Wielded carelessly, well, you get lost in the sauce, as some might say, and the sauce don't even taste that good. Thus, making your story more of a puzzle to be solved and less of an engaging romp through the subject of your story. Speaking of which, yeah, let's go ahead and move on to that. Story subject. What is the subject of the story is probably the most important thing in the story. If the subject is, am I the a-hole? Yeah, you probably want to include a lot of extra background. In stories focusing on an individual, you want to talk about that individual for at least half of the post. They should be center stage, their antics, the things they said and did. Those are the most important bits. Why you chose to write a whole Reddit post about a singular entity should be answered within the post itself. Therefore, your Karen or Kevin or Neckbeard should take up a not insignificant percentage of your story. Dare I say even the majority, perhaps even the vast majority. Oh, hey, did you bowl a perfect game and win a trophy between events in your story? That's great, I'm so proud of you. Here, I have a cookie, and let me give you a big hug. Unless that's relevant, don't put it in the story. Like, unless the story ends with a bowling duel to the death. There is no reason for that to be in here. Why did you tell me about your bowling skills? Why did you think that I would care? Granted, you could ask that question about any Reddit story, no matter how popular, but I still think my point stands. If it's not relevant to the story, leave it backstage. You ever heard of Chekhov's gun? If not, it's basically this. If you show a gun at some point in the story, you are obligated to use it at some point during the story. So if you bragged about your chess skills at the beginning of the post, that better come into play later in the story. Or better yet, save bragging about your chess skills for when it is actually relevant. You promised something in your title or in your intro, and now you need to deliver. So don't promise us payoffs that we're not going to get. This also plays into our next topic quite nicely, and that is story structure. Now, there are many ways to go about structuring a story, but the most basic version of a story structure is this. Start at the beginning, you are OP. You're just doing your OP things, and then a thing happens that takes you on a ride. The ride builds and builds until it reaches a crescendo, and then there's a gradual tapering off with some sort of resolution. You can also taper it off immediately with a big bang and all sorts of fireworks. That's generally what I tend to enjoy, but usually it is the tapering off. So we roll the boulder up the hill. Okay, you with me, and then we let the boulder roll itself down the other side of the hill. The boulder in this metaphor should be the subject or the moral of your story. This is more or less the structure of every story ever written, at least the competent ones. What is normal becomes warped, and then there is the fallout. Think about it like a tornado hitting your house. Before the tornado hits your house, everything's fine. And then you weather the storm, and eventually everything dissipates, and you have to sift through the wreckage as lawn furniture falls from the sky. Deviations from the main story for sub-stories is acceptable when relevant. Did you finally catch that cantankerous possum because of a time you went hunting with your dad and he taught you how to tie a snare and you really want to pay homage to your old man? All right, cool. Take us on a tiny ride or maybe slap us with a bit of exposition. But again, keep it at just a paragraph or two. Side stories are fine, but we need to keep the main story in focus. Something to keep in mind when writing a series is that each part of the series should be a complete story that can more or less stand on its own. So each part of your series should follow the same progression. Do remember to keep it serialized, however. Each event in your series should have some continuity, some escalation from episode to episode, build on what we already know, and keep us strapped in for the entire ride. By making each part of your series a complete story, you increase your reach to people who might have missed other parts of the story. Perhaps they don't want to go back and read. And of course, this will also increase your ability to farm upvotes, and thereby my ability to farm views. If someone stumbles on part 2 and likes it, yeah, they'll go back and watch part 1. Keeping each part its own self-contained story is a perfect way to magnify your reach within a series. We have seen it done beautifully on this channel. We've also seen it done not so beautifully. We have a heavy focus on sagas. I love a good saga. The operative word there being a good saga. I'll probably read it regardless and slap it up, but yeah, there's a reason that some fly and some flop. All of this brings us to dialogue. Now, dialogue, along with chronology, is probably one of the hardest things to deal with inside of a story, unless you have exact transcripts for the conversations that were had. Generally, we don't. Dialogue in a Reddit story is best carried out in very small spurts, and you have to try and make it as organic as possible. Personally, I love dialogue. Gives me a chance to give characters voices, flesh them out just a little bit more, but it needs to be used in moderation. I'm gonna be honest, really, the usage of dialogue is not an easy thing to teach. Much like anything else on this planet, it is a skill that you have to grind. Much like story structure, there are many philosophies to dialogue. The easiest way to write dialogue without transcripts is to just capture the tone of a conversation. Let's say a conversation breaks out about the morality of screaming bait and switch to get a discount on stuff at Walmart. What were the assertions that were made? Maybe you, as the OP, have a stance that it's okay to rip off Walmart a little bit because, yeah, screw them. And then your friend asserts that it's never okay to act in bad faith for personal gain. How would you write that? I actually want you to think about that. Go ahead, write it out in the comments for me. I will respond with a letter grade. I'll probably give you an A for effort. Just try. Maybe we will come back to them and I'll pick up some of my favorites for a short follow-up video. I'd argue that a lot of them will probably be featured in the stream tomorrow, where we will be reading out some comments. If that doesn't motivate you, then nothing will. Now this is where you have to really dig into your brain meat and think about how a normal conversation actually flows. Maybe you walk outside with your friend and they begin asking, why did you have to make a scene? And then you respond with, I didn't want to pay $20 for a tote when I knew I could get it cheaper. And then maybe your friend responds with, yeah, that's totally worth acting like a complete ass in public. And you respond with, why not? It's just Walmart. It's the societal equivalent of a freak show on wheels. And what it is that I am demonstrating here is a simple call and response dialogue. For a good example of this type of dialogue, go check out some Calvin and Hobbes comics. Just don't go Googling it because some of those images can be questionable from time to time. Call and response is basically just ask a question and then the other character answers that question. When more than two people are involved in dialogue, you can have two people doing calls or questions and one responding, or other characters playing a neutral party, whatever you want. Mix and match. All of this while keeping it as true to the actual events as humanly possible. This is the skeleton of writing most dialogue. Even if no direct question is asked, all conversation boils down to requests and responses. Let's say you have a character in your story who is just trauma dumping. One of the things that I despise the most. They're just talking about how depressed they feel completely unprompted. Well, monologuing in the presence of others is really just a question without a question mark. The question is, who is listening? And does anybody care? The response from the other characters should answer that question. Is anyone listening? And do they care? Feel free to write up your own examples of that in the comments as well. I would thank you quite heartily. The best way to learn dialogue is to watch and read other people's work. Eventually, you'll find a delivery method that jives with how you think dialogue should be. There will be some growing pains as you come into your own, but please just keep at it and always be open to criticism. If all else fails, feel free to just broad stroke the bullet points of a conversation with a few choice quotes in the paragraph. That is a great way to save space and time while also not diverting too much from the original content of the conversation. Again, it is perfectly fine to be slightly vague. Readers can generally do most of the legwork within their own mind. I love stories written like this. It gives me a lot of room to riff. Sometimes less is more, and quality over quantity goes a long way. Brevity is levity, as a wiser man than me once said. All of this brings us to our final topic, which is, of course, meatiness. All right, meatiness. So, how beefy should a post be? Well, in my experience on Reddit, I would say that anywhere between 2,500 to 4,500 words is about the sweet spot. Anything longer and you risk losing people's attention span and getting a lot of comments saying, TLDR. Anything under 2,500 words will generally just be skimmed over or ignored completely. There are exceptions to the rules, of course. If you are super good at abbreviating events while maintaining the proper gravity, then maybe short posts are going to be your go-to. If you have a pretty magnificent grasp of the written word and literature, you can probably go right up to the character limit and retain even a Redditoid's attention span. When in doubt though, yes, aim between 2,500 and 4,500 words. If you have to say more than that, it might be best to break your story up into a series, even if it's only 2 parts. Interest in the first post will definitely keep people around for a second one. Plus, farm and double those upvotes. At the end of the day, all this is really a subjective opinion. I have seen the beefiest of posts go to the moon, and the same goes for very abbreviated posts. Luck is also a factor, but even more than that, story composition, the biggest factor of all. Really, it all comes down to your ability to retain a reader. If you fail with long posts, try going shorter. If you fail with short posts, maybe try going longer. A bit of experimentation never hurt, and eventually you will find that magical formula that works for you. Final thoughts. Writing a Reddit story, yeah, I understand. It is a nerve-wracking endeavor. You are basically putting your diary entry up on the godforsaken internet. Whew, that is a rough path to walk. And just getting something up online, honestly, that is an accomplishment all on its own. Taking criticism or rejection with dignity, that is an even greater accomplishment. If you want to walk the path of a Reddit story writer, and you want to be good at it, well, it's going to take some time. That being said, I do hope that this helps you to think a little bit harder about how you present yourself and your Reddit stories. Hopefully with this guide up, I won't have to eviscerate any more OPs in the near future. Fingers crossed. It's really not something that I enjoy doing. At least, not overly so. I do have one final piece of advice for all the writers out there, and that is proofread your stories. Oh, but I did proofread my story, I hear you shouting at your monitor. Okay, great. Next time, read it out loud as you proofread it. If you read your draft and posted it and it still came out scuffed, read it out loud to yourself. This is the easiest and cheapest way to catch any nonsense that you might have missed. Either that, or you can ask someone else to proofread it for you. There are plenty of people on the internet who will proofread your stuff for free or for a very nominal fee. And I do think that if you are aspiring to be a Reddit writer, then you should be able to proofread your own stuff. I do the most trying to clean up things where I spot something weird, trying to make sense of strange sentence structure. But yeah, there comes a certain point where even I start to lose hope. I'm just like, I really shouldn't have gotten into this thing. If you're trying to throw a first draft at me, don't be surprised if it gets thrown back in your face. I do appreciate you putting yourself out there. I definitely respect the hustle. I don't want to be cruel, but I do want to say, please make it worth my time, my viewers' time, all of our time. Everybody wants their 15 minutes in the spotlight, but deserve it, is all I'm going to say. In summation, friends, I really do want you to write the best stories that you are able to. I also want to thank you for listening along with me, taking this advice on board if you have. It's really not as funny as some of the other stuff that I've done, but hopefully it will keep me from losing my mind at this or OP or that OP, because I know that's really not a good look. I would love to read every story and enjoy it thoroughly. That's the aim, at least. We've got a lot of good writers. We've also got some writers that are trying their best, and that's really all that I can ask. As long as the story isn't a nothing burger, I will eat it. I want to thank you guys for listening again. I hope you like, comment, and or subscribe if you enjoyed this video. You know what I'm saying? We got links in the description, plugs, playlist, podcast, Spotify, iTunes, Teespring, if you're trying to rock that merch. We stream this on Twitch, as I mentioned. We've also got other social medias, Twitter, Discord, Facebook. We've also got my channel members, my gorgeous, wonderful, beautiful, generous patrons, whom I would like to thank very much, as I do every episode. So, thank you too. Sean Cantwell, Heaven Sent, Robert Thibodeau, Jackie McQuitty, Grimstripe, Trainboy, AJ Collins, Tiny Boy, Tooth Plushy, Valley, Corey Arts, Kelly Clark, Bedazzled Misery, Liquor Lush Loser, Floretic Flavor, Dungeon Bat, Billy D, Robert Waits, Carrie Sepulveda, Brandon Ashcraft, John Endors, Phantom Danica, Orgamy Steve, Skylar Mary Emera, The Gypsy Barber, Fire Drake, Samantha, Death Flagship, Bearded Snake, Buy Two, Get One Hand. Heading over to Patreon, I would also like to thank Miss Black, Dark Luscious, Harley Hohen, Robert Waits, Camille Sarah, Chase for Blue Kraken, Roxanne Wolf, Sip Jerry, Conrad Ingy, Captain Clown Jerry, Aaron Jerry, Deku, Esteban, Orgamy Steve, Santa Jerry, Silent Revolver, PCB, Fluxer, the Jerry of Industry, the original Jerry, Ravencraft, Pig Jerry, Destiny Piper, Jerry Kitsune, Salty Wizard, a very tired Jerry, yeah, I feel that, a Justy Jargonian Jerry, and Frankenberry, ain't that a hiding bitch though, Assassin Pelt Jerry, Aurora Wildheart, Baby Jerry, Bailey Joy, Bearded Jerry, Benji and the Jets, Billy D, Bitch Gremlin, Blake the Hero, Bronze Kraken, Catholic Jerry, Commander J Tank, Dr. Lux, Aaron Era, East Sparks, Frozen Number Studio, Fire Drake, Get Two at the Doodles, Commission Open No, Hadrian BR, Inquisitor Jerry, Irish Pirate, Iron Olive, Irradiated Jam, JM Coon, Jerry Smith, Jerry Blacktail, Jerry the Outlaw Mother Trucker, Jerry Maya was a bullfrog, John Hero, John Cahill, Crowley, Kelly Kraken, Lady Awakening, Legend McGurk, Miss Monday, Lord Jerry-O, Leader of the Thunder Jerrys, Luke X was a race car driver, he was a good friend of mine, never did win that chicken flag, but I heard him drink his wine. I don't know how the rhythm goes, it's fine, like and subscribe. Well, Lady Nick, Smeldar the Destroyer, Mental Factor, Needless King 89, Paragon Soul, Phantom of the Pines, Jerkins, Jerry Beth, Queens, Quaaludes, and Quagmires, Rose, Jerry Miller, Sarita the Lolita, Saucy Octopus, Scarlet Kevin, Sergeant Gate Cop, Bringer of the Law, Silo Imp, Steampunk Alley, Stephanie Goodness, Sign After Groomstick, Grill, Tomato, Tapioca Balloon, the Gypsy Barber, the Italian Greyhound Dino, the Little Sue, Archer Fusky, try to find another model to get back in the real world. You probably don't want to blow into that balloon, this is a sticky balloon. Vanguard Angel, VC3, Viking Jerry, Void the Comet Destroyer, Wiki Tech, Zephyr the Gargoyle, or Clay, Commodore Mooney, Kira, not another Jerry, but he is though, Cage Alex 9, Redwing, Bad Penny Lane, Naga Viper, Saint Blessing, Third Stuff, Venom Jerry, Wasabi Jerry, Jace Christensen, One Leg Jerry has returned from battle. Oh, salute to you, a normal Jerry. I got what's next? We got popcorn, savory, and chocolate pretzels, chips, no Doritos, and soda, no Mountain Dew. Any takers? I need my Doritos, son. Admiral T-Tech, Amber Alder, another stupid hipster, Atomic Jerryzilla, Breaker of the Tom Army, Bartender Keelia, Big Dad Wolf, Broken Spine Horseradish, Cake Jerry, the original, different Jerry, California Jerry, Go Shepherd 7, Lot Chicana Panda, Corey does art, sometimes, Cowabunga Cody, Cryptides, the Fog Jerry, Dr. Tuna, Dilf Jerry, Dopamine Day Jerry is, Dwarfy Dude, Dwarven Ramsey, half the calories, all the hate. Is that a throwback to the stories about Kevin with Supermarket? That's beautiful. Ghost of Alpha, Greymon 365, he cannot. Hydra Jerry Solon, Janitor Jerry's roaming the streets of Finland, hunting down the Rudo headband. Jasmine, Jeffrey, Geralt of Rivia, Jerry and Tom versus Happy New Year's, we have the apocalypse. Jerry, Bo, 2 S's and an E. Jerry Springer, the results are in. You are not the neckbeard. Jerry the Sussy Baka, Jerry's mom has got it going on. Jerry Older Rivera, Jerry Rocksters, Jerry Roleplaying Game, Keaton Tails, Kid Marvelous, Kitchikin, Lucia Lovecraft, Machia CD. Maybe next time, Milk Fed, Miss Duchess, Mr. Gas Mask, Not Invisible Angel, Raptor Art, Sylvan Dark, Skymar, Ravenswood, Smegma Male, Grind Set, Jerry, getting that cheese. God. Thanks, I hate it. Snob Jerry. That's Snary if you didn't know. Spoonie the Rogue, Spoop is Gary, Jerry Ton, Techno Dubs, the original Jerry. They call me Jerry Two Knives. Jerry Pie. I don't get it. I'm sorry. Do Infinite Jerry and beyond. Unkale. Throws 2 liter Mountain Dew. Grow my neck beer, grow. It's Jerry time. Holds ReddX Morpher. Hygiene. It's Jerry time. Holds ReddX Morpher. Humility. And thank you to my $1 patrons as well. Bless up to all the Jerrys and not Jerrys alike. If you can help support the channel, that's massive. If you can't afford it, don't sweat it too hard, friends. I just appreciate you coming on through, hanging out with me, and I hope that you'll come on back and hang out with me again tomorrow. In order to do so, you need to keep yourself safe out there, wash your hands, but also take some time out and do something that you personally enjoy today. Maybe like watching some more ReddX videos. Always remember, friends, you are loved, you are worthy, you definitely deserve it, and I shall see you in the next one. So until then, friends, bye-bye.